let me introduce the team here. We have Giulio, who is our communication manager. We have Beatrice. She's our master of the framework. She knows by heart all the 400 plus indicators, and she has a special expertise on resilience. And myself, Nathalie, I'm coordinating the work on the label here for the Secretariat held by GIB, Global Infrastructure Basel. So the main purpose of the FAST-Infra Label is to provide market confidence and foster investment in sustainable infrastructure through a global label, and this to lay the ground for sustainable infrastructure to become a liquid asset class. So here today, we are going to first have a quick introduction on the FAST-Infra Label, and then we will go into the details of the documents that are put to public consultation. So the dimensions and criteria, the methodology, and the verification and labeling requirements. And then we will have a few minutes on the technicalities of the public consultation. And finally, we will have some time for a Q&A session, questions and answers. So let me first introduce you quickly to the label. So to introduce a first slide to show the urgent need to drive more private capital to sustainable infrastructure. You see on the graph here on the left side that private investment is increasing in infrastructure, but clearly not enough. Like we need at least 10 times the amount. So there is a need of 6.3 trillion a year until 2030 to reach the SDGs. And at the moment in 2022, we see that the private sector is investing $400 billion. And the main issue is that most of the money is going to high-income countries, 70% by 2023, and it grows only very little in low-income countries. So volume and quality of data are required. We need clear definition of sustainable infrastructure to tackle the rampant greenwashing. There is a need for data, financial and non-financial, to mitigate risks, especially in these emerging economies, and also innovative solutions that are data-driven, that to standardize investment processes to support the building up of this liquid asset class of sustainable infrastructure. So the FAST-Infra Label wants to provide data and transparency and really help channeling capital thanks to data and transparency to this infrastructure in the country where it's most needed. And here I can give you like three main features of the FAST-Infra Label. So first, it's a global label, and it's applicable to all sectors, so to all infrastructure sectors. It's not something, we are not reinventing a new concept. It's built on more than 25 established standards already in the market. For example, the IFC performance standard or the Equator principles. So the FAST-Infra Label is really an integrative standard, impartial, and technically very rigorous. The aim of the label is to enable developers to showcase the positive impact they have. So first, that they do no significant harm, but also that they can demonstrate a positive contribution to at least one of the criteria, meaning one of the sustainable objectives. And also then to facilitate decision-making processes on the investor side. So let me quickly explain you the whole structure, or like the FAST-Infra Label is coming from an initiative, the FAST-Infra initiative, and FAST stands for Finance to Accelerate the Sustainable Transition. And this initiative was started 4 years ago under the One Planet Summit, which was led by the French president at that time. People came together and had the idea of this FAST-Infra initiative. And there are three main projects or pillars under this FAST-Infra initiative, which is now constituted as an association, the FAST-Infra Group. And you can see the members at the top, in the logos in this square at the top. And the three pillars that they are responsible for is the FAST-Infra platform, which is a kind of project preparation and financing platform. The aim is to standardize processes here. FAST-Infra Beyond is an innovation center on regulatory and financial processes also around infrastructure. And then we have the label. And here you see we have governance bodies, two main governance bodies, the Executive Advisory Committee, which is constituted of like 30 plus members that elects 8 members building the steering committee. And this steering committee is making the decision on the label. The decisions are then implemented by Global Infrastructure Basel and Bloomberg together, running the Secretariat and the data repository. On the next slide, you see the constitution of the governance bodies. So at the top, you see the steering committee and then the Executive Advisory Committee. And here the slide shows how it's balanced across different types of institutions. So on the left side, you see the public sector. Then on the second column, you see the organization belonging to the financial sector. Then on the third column, the ones belonging to the developers and private sectors. Then we have a lot of representation from NGOs and associations, and finally academia. We created also a new group, which is their endorsers, to be engaged with the label, which are not exactly governance bodies, but it's also a way to engage with the label. So if interested, please don't hesitate to apply to be part of one, either a governance body or to be an endorser. So finally, before I hand over to Beatrice, I just quickly run you through the journey so far and the next milestones. So the whole journey for GIB and Bloomberg began in November 2022. We were announced to run the Secretariat and the data repository for the FAST-Infra label. Then the whole year 2023, we built up the governance, and also we established the first framework. This first framework was tested on a few projects, and we were finally able to announce 5 self-assessed labeled projects at COP28 in last December in Dubai. Now we are launching the second framework, and this is why we are doing this public consultation that started at the beginning of the month. And based on the comments that we will receive from this public consultation, we will have a new version of the framework from May on, which will be the 0.3 version. And finally, this will lead to the online platform in November 2024, where projects will be able to self-assess their projects online. So I think that's a quick introduction. We can pause one minute here in case there is any question. Otherwise, I would hand over to Beatrice to have a look at the dimensions and criteria in details, which is a document submitted to public consultation.
Okay, so SDO1 is the document which contains all the indicators that the project has to answer in order to get the FAST-Infra label. As you may know, the indicators are divided into 4 dimensions, which are the environmental, the adaptation and resilience, the social, and the governance dimension. And each one of these dimensions is further subdivided into criteria, as you should displayed in this slide. So each one of these criteria is structured as in the following slide. Next slide,
I can
please.
join it if need be.
Sorry, Louis? So this is the structure of the indicators of each criteria. So each criterion is organized according to this structure. We have the name of this dimension and the name of the criterion on top, and then we have 2 main sections. The first section is the baseline requirements, and the second section is the positive contribution. The baseline requirements contain all the indicators which are mandatory, meaning the project has to answer all the indicators in a satisfactory way in order to obtain the label. Whereas we only require project to claim one positive contribution across all the criteria. But of course, we encourage project to claim as many positive contributions as possible. So both the baseline requirements and the positive contribution are organized into sections and subsections, as you see here. The declaration section contains the main indicators, which are more general and try to capture the essence of the criterion, whereas the indicators are more specific questions that we ask projects. These questions are divided into different themes. And then there is a section which is called self-reporting, which is an opportunity for projects to provide feedbacks on the indicators and also to provide further explanation on some answer that they provided for the indicators. So these indicators requires different types of answers. So most of them are single select answer, for example, yes, no. Others are multi-select. This is the case when the project can, for example, select all the types of positive contribution or all the way a positive contribution is achieved. Then we have text indicator, which are required if the project needs to provide further explanation. We have a number, quantitative indicators, for example, the female representation in the project's board. And then we have year or datum, when we ask the project to state a given deadline within which a certain target will be achieved. So in the next slides, I will talk a little bit about the individual criteria. And of course, each criteria has many different indicators, as you see in the document posted online. But in this presentation, I just want to capture the essence of each criterion. So for the environmental dimension, we have 4 criteria. The first one, E1, biodiversity and nature. In the baseline requirements, we ask project to achieve net gains of biodiversity if the project is located in a critical habitat, and no net loss of biodiversity if the project is located in a non-critical habitat. And of course, all these terms like net gains, non-net loss, critical and non-critical habitats are all defined in the glossary that is given to the projects together with this form. In the positive contribution, we ask projects to achieve net gains of biodiversity independently on whether they are in a critical or non-critical habitats. For E2, climate change, in the baseline requirement, we ask projects to monitor and reduce their scope 1, 2, and 3 emission. In the positive contribution, we bring it one step further, and we ask the project not only minimize and reduce these emissions, but also they avoid emission compared to the baseline scenario in which the project wouldn't exist. Next slide, please. E3 is resources and circular economy. In the baseline requirements, projects have to show that they use a life cycle approach on material footprint and create long-term value for the assets. In the positive contribution, they have to show that they enhance natural resource use and material circularity compared to the sector benchmark. So they need to do better than a benchmark. For E4, pollution, again, as you need to, the project has to avoid, or when avoidance is not possible, minimize the negative impacts related to pollution. And in the positive contribution, we want the project not only to avoid or minimize, but actually to achieve net reduction in pollution compared to pre-project levels. We then now have a pool. Julia, could you please launch the pool?
I can't see anything.
It is appearing now.
We are in between the slides. We are asking the participants to answer a poll.
Yeah. So this first poll is about the environmental dimension. And the question that we're asking is, do you agree that all labeled projects should follow a life cycle approach on material footprint during design, construction, operation, and decommissioning, in addition to applying the IFC performance standards and/or equator principle and the range of other requirements? So please take your time to answer this poll.
Yeah, we can take 10 more seconds, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering the poll.
Okay, so we move on to the next dimension, which is adaptation and resilience, which contain only one criterion. So in this criterion, we ask a project to be able to identify and manage all the relevant physical, transition, and human-made risk over the project lifetime. In the positive contribution, we ask project to be able to improve the resilience not only within its boundaries, meaning be able to absorb and recover after disruption, but we ask the project to extend or to contribute to resilience improvement beyond its boundaries at a broader system scale. I think we have another poll now. Judo, can you please launch the poll? So for this second poll related to this criterion, we would like to ask you, do you agree that all labeled projects should identify all relevant physical, transition, and human-made risk and their impact on the project, in addition to applying the IFC performance standards and/or equator principle and the range of other requirements?
Thank you very much again for answering.
Thank you. Going to the next slide.
Okay, so let's move on to the next dimension, the social dimension, which is divided into 5 criteria. For ethics, inclusivity, in the baseline requirements, we ask project to implement a gender-based violence and harassment risk assessment and a corresponding action plan. In the positive contribution, again, we ask for a plus, which is to promote gender equality and inclusivity for not only internal stakeholders, but also external stakeholders. For S7, health and safety, we ask project 2 things: to comply with occupational health and safety, national laws and practices, and to implement an assessment to assess and manage the impacts on community health and safety. In the positive contribution, not only projects have to assess and manage these impacts, but they also have to improve the health and safety of the surrounding communities. For S8, human and labor rights, we ask project to identify and disclose any human and labor rights issues across the supply chain and to promote local employment opportunity. In the positive contribution, projects also need to show that they enhance human and labor right measures beyond national laws and sector benchmark. For S9, land acquisition and resettlement, project needs to avoid, or if avoidance is not possible, minimize involuntary resettlement and economic displacement. In the positive contribution, again, we take it one step further and we ask projects to improve the well-being of the surrounding or affected communities. S10 does not have a positive contribution. So for S10, which is the criterion called stakeholders engagement, we ask projects to engage and manage all the affected stakeholders and communities throughout the project life. So I believe now that we have another pool, could you please launch it? Thank you, Giulio. So for the social dimension, we want to ask you if you agree that all labeled projects should implement a gender-based violence and harassment risk assessment and corresponding action plan to address negative effects and amplify the positive ones in addition to applying the IFC performance standards and/or Pareto principle and the range of other requirements?
Thank you for answering. Yep, we have it.
Okay, so we move on to the last dimension, which is the governance dimension. For governance dimension, we don't have a positive contribution, but the project has to pass all the baseline requirements. So for G11, anti-corruption, the project has to show that it is developing, implementing, and managing an anti-corruption and anti-bribery management system. For G12, transparency and accountancy, and accountability, we ask projects to implement measures to promote ethics, accountability, integrity, and transparency throughout its life. G13, fiscal transparency, we ask projects to comply with national accounting and fiscal rules, as well as show evidence that they're not seeking fiscal advantages beyond the project scope. And finally, for G14, we ask that project implement an environmental and social management system in adherence with national and international corporate governance regulation, and that they track sustainability performance targets over time. So I believe we have another poll now. Could you please launch it? Okay, so do you agree that all labeled projects should implement an environmental and social management system in adherence with national or international corporate governance regulation, whichever is more stringent, and ensuring the sustainability performance targets are tracked with time-bound milestone, in addition to apply the IFC performance standards and/or Equator principle and the range of other requirements?
Thank you.
Okay, so we now move on to the next document for the public consultation, ST02. So back to you, Natalie.
Thank you, Beatrice. So yes, let me introduce you to the second document of the public consultation, which is called ST02 and is the methodology. Actually, it's the labeling process and information flow. So first of all, the project applies for the FAST-Infra label for free on the website, and we ask them to give a few information on the project. It's very short: sector, project size, development stage, CAPEX, and country. Then the project needs to confirm that it meets the minimum safeguards. So what we call the minimum safeguards is actually an ESG risk assessment, so environmental, social, governance risk assessment, and also some financial disclosure. So here into more details, we ask the project to have published or being the process of publishing an ESIA, an environmental and social impact assessment. We ask them to have developed a climate risk and resilience assessment. We ask them also to have an environmental and social management system in place, or at least planning it. We ask them for a stakeholder engagement plan, a sustainability mitigation and action plan that is based on the previous documents, and an environmental and social action plan. On top of this, the project needs to demonstrate that it is compliant either with the IFC performance standards or the Equator principles. We also ask them to declare if there are any associated facilities. And finally, we have some financial disclosure question like general financial metrics, the financing ratio and structure of the project, and who are the financial partners and what contributions. The third step is then going into the details of the criteria. So as Beatrice was explaining in details before, we have the 14 criteria across the 4 dimensions, and we have at each time the baseline requirements and then a positive contribution. So the project needs to meet all the 14 criteria, to meet all the indicators of the 14 criteria for the baseline requirement, and then it needs to show at least one positive contribution for one of the criteria. So if the project is compliant and has gone through all these steps, then it earns automatically the self-assessed label. But there are 2 labels in total. So this is the self-assessed label. And now I will show you how you get the verified FAST-Infra label. So to get the verified FAST-Infra label that you see here as the 6th step, you need to go for a third-party verification, which means your project is going to be reviewed by an independent reviewer that we call a verification body. And this is against cost. So this is a contract that the project is doing with the verification body. And we will go into more details on the requirement for the verification bodies in a few minutes. So here there is again a poll. So on the methodology, do you agree that the following minimum safeguards should be required by the project? So it's the ESIA, the Environmental and Social Impact Assessment Report, the Climate Risk and Resilience Assessment for both physical and transition risks, the ESMS, Environmental and Social Management System, a stakeholder engagement plan, and then the Sustainability Mitigation Action Plan and the Environmental and Social Action Plan. So you can tick all the boxes if you think that everything should be required, or you can choose the one that you need are really mandatory. Maybe 10 seconds for this as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yep.
So here now, another point of the methodology is the validity of the criteria, of the label, sorry. So for the self-assessed label, basically the self-assessed label is valid as long as the project is updating the self-assessment for the pre-construction, so development and construction stages, until it reaches operation. So it can stay in a self-assessed mode until it reaches operation. Once it's under operation, the self-assessed label is only valid for maximum 2 years. After that, or latest after 2 years, it needs to go for verification. Otherwise, it will lose the self-assessed label. For the verified label, in principle, the label is valid for 3 years. But for the pre-construction and construction stages, then it's until it reaches the next stage. So construction for a pre-construction stage and until operation for a construction stage. And once the project is under construction, then the label is valid for 3 years. But the self-assessment still needs to be updated every year. And there is also a surveillance audit happening from the verification body every 12 months, every year. So I think we don't have a poll here. So I'm just going straight to the next item, which is the third document, RQ01, verification and labeling requirements. So this is really the document for the verifier to understand if there would be if they would fit to become a verification body for the FAST-Infra label. So basically, first thing to know is that we ask the verification bodies to be accredited to ISO 17021. On top of this, we ask them to fulfill the requirements of this document, RQ01. And basically, these are 5 key points. So we ask them to to engage with external stakeholders during the verification process. Then we detail also in this document a bit more the data that the verification body must provide to the Secretariat, and also the information that they need to publish in case of certification of the project. Then there is some details on the right of the Secretariat to observe verification audits, some specifications also on how to calculate the audit time a verification body needs to assess a project. And finally, what are we asking the verification body to bring when they apply to become a verification body? So here into a little bit more details. So on like a bit precisions on top of ISO 17021. So we ask the verification body to have a verification agreement together with the project. So both need to agree on this and sign it. So in this agreement, there are some requirements for the client to be stated, and also requirements to the verification body, for example, in terms of data safety and these kind of things. Then regarding stakeholder engagement, so we ask the verification body to, on top of on checking the stakeholder engagement of the project itself, we ask them to identify further stakeholder if necessary, and to engage with them, having interviews with them during the verification process. Information requirements. So these are specifications on how to use the FAST-Infra label and the claims associated with the label. Then on the process requirements, there are also some more details on general audit requirement, how much should a verification last, how much it should cost. We have here some guidance, some figures depending on the CAPEX and so on. Then there is some point on the right of the Secretariat to do some observation of the verification audit at a specific frequency. Then here we also specify what needs to be considered to calculate the audit time, and also if a site visit is necessary, depending also on some trigger points. On the conduction of the audits, then we have some requirements here for project to make claims against the FAST-Infra label, and also for the verification body. Then we also ask the verification body to provide the report to the Secretariat. So these are all add-ons on ISO 17021, some more details, some specification that is specifically relevant to the label. And finally, this is what we expect from the verification body to bring when they apply to become a verification body. So we want them to be compliant with ISO 17021 or accredited by an international accreditation forum member. They need to bring experience with the IFC performance standard or the equated principles. They need to understand what these 4 dimensions are about. So environmental, social governance, and resilience and adaptation. And of course, they need to have passed the training, the FAST-Infra Label training, which is ended by an exam. We also have an interview with the verification body, and then they get a certificate. After that, they can carry on verifications of projects. So that was it for the verification and labeling requirements. We have a very last poll, I think, on this one. So here, the question is, based on the previous market analysis, the verification and labeling requirements have been designed so that a typical project may need between 2 and 4 months from application to be granted its label. Do you think it's too short? Is it about right, or is it too long? And the second question is also based on the same market analysis that we did. We found out that a verification of a project a typical project like for in operation that has a capex around $100 million may cost between 15 and 25,000 US dollars, depending on the project location, size, complexity. Do you think this is too little? This is a good range, or is this already too expensive? I leave here 5 more seconds to answer. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next agenda item, I'll hand over to my colleague Giulio, which he will explain a little bit more about the technicalities to the public consultation, how to answer.
Yes. Thank you, Natalie. Very briefly before we jump into the question and answer. So first of all, right now the only way you have to send us your comment and feedback for any of these 3 documents it's through our website, the FAST-Infra Label.org website. Next slide, please. Within the website itself, you will be able to access the public consultation section through the navigation bar, where you have the possibility to overview not only the public consultation, but also other options or how to get involved in the label itself. Natalie, at the beginning of the presentation, was mentioning about the application for EAC to become EAC member, endorser, verifies. We all gathered this opportunity inside the same page. Public consultation, it's inside there, where you can see exactly what are the public consultation currently open, and also the past consultation. Once you click on one of these boxes for the specific document you want to review, you then access to the more in detail page. Next slide. In the detail page, you will be able to access 2 more links. One is download the document, where you can take a look at the public consultation document currently used, and share your feedback. Share your feedback link that leads to a form, an external form. The form explains a little bit at first with an introduction section how the form is developed. We designed the form in the way we could give everybody access to it, meaning that there is a possibility to give 2 layers of feedback, a very high-level feedback that is quite similar to the poll that we did this morning, where you give a general understanding of agreements or disagreements or opinion on some of the section of the documents, and then at the end of this section you have a possibility to give more in detail comments. You will see that in the screenshot, or on the right bottom, there is a possibility to continue with a more in detail comments. This goes through, the sections are going through each chapter or each criteria. It depends on the document you are reviewing, so that you can really share your comments if you are specialized in some specific section of any of these documents. Yeah.